The time has come, my Ashen Hunter Cursed Undead and Demon Slayer brethren. We've spent a few weeks going through 129 bosses. Some criminally garbage, some that were alright, and some that just missed the final cut. Today we're taking a look at my top 10 best bosses in all of Blood Souls. I encourage you to stick around to the very end of the video as I've got a few special announcements for you. But without further ado, let's kick things off with number 10. Coming in at number 10, we've got my choice for the best boss in Demon Souls. Some of you may be asking, what elevates the Tower Knight over bosses like the False King, Maiden Astraya, and the Flame Lurker? Well, a big part of it is nostalgia. Demon Souls was my first experience in the Blood Souls continuum. Let's be honest, Vanguard and Phalanx aren't really great showings for bosses. So when I finally clawed my way through 1-2 and came face to face with this enormous knight, my jaw dropped. How in the hell am I supposed to kill this thing? Before we get to that, let's talk about why the knight is so large and in charge. Boletaria was home to many honorable knights. One of these knights, Alfred, was well known for wielding the largest and heaviest shield in the land. Once King ALONNE aroused the Old One and demons swept through the castle, Alfred was corrupted and grew into what you see before you. The thing I enjoy about his lore is that just like Phalanx, he's turned into an exaggerated version of his former self. However, instead of getting their cowardly just desserts like Phalanx, the Tower Knight gets a lot more badass. What I love about the fight itself is how it's, from my view, the very closest FromSoft has ever gotten to getting a puzzle boss done right. The reality is the Tower Knight isn't that formidable of a foe, but you have to learn how to approach the fight. After you clear out the archers, you'll need to find a way to penetrate his shield, or maybe not. No, you actually need to get behind the knight and slash at his ankles to bring him to the ground. Once you do, the fight is essentially over. Getting to those ankles unscathed though is no easy task for new players. This battle is an excellent learning tool on analyzing your surroundings and finding the perfect balance between patience and when to kick your aggression into high gear and go on the offensive. And when it comes down to it, it's a boss I'll always remember as the defining moment when I fell in love with the series. As far as I'm concerned, the true Demon Souls begins here. Right from one best to another, and this time I'm handing the title of Best Dark Souls 2 boss to Sir ALONNE. Sir ALONNE was an Eastern knight that allied himself to a lord he saw potential in. With the knight's help, that lord came known as the Old Iron King. However, as the inevitable curse began to plague the kingdom, Old Iron started resorting to morally questionable methods to stave it off. ALONNE, holding his honor above all else, left the king to reflect on his decisions. That's where we find the warrior, meditating to sort his thoughts. The knight gracefully accepts your challenge and the duel is on. And what a duel it is! I've always found Dark Souls 2 to be the most clunky of the games, but Sir ALONNE feels like perhaps the only foe in the entire game that is immune to this. Every attack moves with swift purpose and unnerving force. He's lightning quick and as unrelenting as they come in this game. And it's a pleasure taking it all in and overcoming this challenge. Perhaps my only minor complaint is that in my fight with him, I found it very easy to exploit his charge attack, but I think I may have had some lousy RNG because he kept repeating it. Either way, it takes very little away from this incredible duel between two warriors. The leaders of the Undead Legion, the Abyss Watchers, were powerful warriors that swore an oath to the blood of the wolf. This covenant's purpose was to stamp out any sign of the Abyss, even if it meant toppling entire kingdoms in the process. With such an honorable intention, it's a tragic fate that the Abyss Watchers perished only to be awoken in a time where Farron has been overrun by the depravity of the Abyss. It's possible, even based on their infighting and proximity to the Abyss and Karthus, that the Watchers have been corrupted by exactly what they sought to destroy. All of this sets an amazing stage for us to fight against the crazed lords of Cinder. And you don't just fight one, you fight two. But in a brilliant twist on the typical FromSoft gang formula, another Watcher jumps in to help you out. It creates this hectic flow on the battlefield between the actual boss, his copy, your helper, and yourself. Once you finally take down the target Watcher, he summons the remaining blood of his compatriots in a last effort to take you down. This fight has so many awesome influences from the series and wisely takes the best part of other fights and blends them into one excellent bout. The only thing keeping the Abyss Watchers from a perfect score is their health pool. I personally find it to just be a little bit low, even with the fight taking place in the first third of the game. I honestly wouldn't be upset one bit if FromSoft patched in a larger HP reserve for the Watchers, because that would push this fight into the perfect territory for me. And speaking of Dark Souls 3 bosses that are just on the cusp of perfection, we've got the Soul of Cinder. Before we get to his tiny flaw, let me gush for a minute. I love this boss so fucking much. Fan service is something that must tread a fine line to hit the right chord, and the Soulless Cinder knocks it out of the park. So many of the moves that I loved using myself over the course of the series show up here. The Dark Wood Grain Flip, homing soul arrows, huge rods, R1 spam, this guy's got it all. That's my one small complaint though. The difficulty of this fight is heavily dependent on RNG. Some of these arsenals like the Sorcerer are easy to deal with, while the Falchion Pyro combo is insanely tough. Despite that minor bump, it's still a lot of fun rolling the roulette until you down him. And once you do down him, he summons the spirit of the OG Lord of Cinder in a last-ditch effort to guard the flame. Once Gwyn's music kicked in, I about lost it. I mean, I actually did get promptly killed because I was so busy losing my mind with excitement. The theme isn't all either. He does Gwyn's leaping slash, his bitch kick, and even the unforgettable grab. This battle reminded me so much of what I love about the series. It was tragic not for its lore about being an amalgamation of all past Lords of Cinder that linked the flame to rid themselves of the curse, but because it's a bittersweet send-off to one of the best damn game series I've ever had the pleasure of playing. Here's our final boss outside the top 5 and the last boss to elude a perfect score. The only reason GEHRMAN doesn't achieve a higher rank is because whereas all of our remaining bosses are perfectly balanced, GEHRMAN is missing one thing for me, the perfect challenge. Out of maybe 15 battles with GEHRMAN, I think I've only ever died twice. That's not to say he isn't difficult, he is. It's a well-fought battle every time we face off. Sadly, it's rare that I lose, and that's enough to prevent him from the highest marks. But that's an incredibly minor point for me, because even with the challenge leaning ever so slightly toward too easy, everything else about this fight is incredible. GEHRMAN is the host of the Hunter's dream, or perhaps it's better to say he's a slave to the host. GEHRMAN was the OG Hunter back in the day when the Beast Scourge first became an issue in Yharnam. Of course, the beasts eventually became too widespread and the Church Hunters were established, leaving GEHRMAN without purpose. So in communion with Lawrence's help, he called upon the Pale Blood, or the Moon Presence. In true fashion of Lawrence's character, he assisted GEHRMAN in getting himself into something he truly didn't understand. The consequence was to become a slave to the Moon Presence, host the Hunter's dream, and recruit new hunters to seek out and destroy other great ones. I'd like to think that in the beginning, delving into this alternative reality was originally GEHRMAN's desire. He wanted to go back to being a useful master of hunters and to be reunited with the one he loved in any way he could. Before long though, it became clear that GEHRMAN's slavery at the hands of the Pale Blood became a never-ending burden. Could you imagine being in a never-ending dream under the thumb of an unbelievably powerful god that coaxes you to repeatedly send hunters out into Yharnam to face immeasurable odds? With all the gravestones in the dream, it's clear that he's been there for quite some time, because you actually have an option to become one of those stones. Yeah, GEHRMAN actually offers to kill you in the dream, severing your ties to it and waking up with no memory of the night's horrible events. Even in his pain, he remains selfless, but if you don't submit, his allegiance to the Pale Blood requires him to take up arms and strike you down. And the fight is an undeniable thrill. He uses a scythe that doubles as a small one-handed blade and moves with the signature quick-step speed of an original hunter. He's got AoE attacks, Super Saiyan-like power-ups, and even can slice through you with wind, something that feels like a small nod to King Alonne. It's so damn enjoyable and is accompanied by a hauntingly beautiful score. I think instead of leaving you with my closing remarks, I'll let GEHRMAN close things out. Clearly, with our number 5 entry receiving a score of 100 out of 100, I believe every single boss in our top 5 is deserving of consideration for the best boss in Blood Souls. So forgive me, but from here on out, numbers won't be much of use other than to indicate their perfection, and I'll have to rely on my gut to rank the final 5. With ORNSTEIN and SMOUGH being likely the fan favorite choice in the series, rivaled only by Knight Artorias, I'm sure many of you are wondering why I put them in the bottom of my top 5. Well, when thinking about who remains and which fight I purely have the most fun with, I unfortunately believe ONS is the least enjoyable. This isn't because of any flaw in their battle, because I think it's without flaw. The difficulty is absolutely spot on for a gank fight, something FromSoft has tried and failed to fully emulate ever since. The speed and lighter attacks of ORNSTEIN are perfectly complemented by the slow but forceful SMOUGH, which goes into design and entertainment. How could I not experience an adrenaline rush when taking these two on? That, and when you finally down one, you've still got the whole battle to go with the souped up version of the remaining boss. Then there's the lore, which I could definitely dedicate an entire video to. To give a brief version, ORNSTEIN is one of the 4 Knights of Gwyn. Being the only one remaining when the fire was fading, he upheld his duty and followed Gwendolyn's directive to guard the Lord Vessel. SMOUGH, who had always aspired to rank in the Knights of Gwyn but was held out for his over-the-top brutality, was also recruited to guard the Lord Vessel. Essentially, they're the last line of defense preventing you from accessing the right to the kiln and seeking out the Lord Souls to fulfill it. When I think of how I personally handle the fight though, I spend most of my time running away. I feel like it's almost necessary as a form of crowd control and waiting for the perfect moment to strike when you're dealing with both of them. As you guys surely know by now, I much prefer to get up in the face of my opponents and handle them aggressively. That's just not a viable strategy for me when I face off against these two. So despite the fact that I think the fight deserves the highest marks I can give, it doesn't quite measure up to the 4 fights remaining for me. Hail to the king! I've gotta say, it was tough differentiating between the top 3 bosses for Dark Souls 3 because they're all so good, but where I feel like the other 2 have small difficulty flaws, the Nameless Kings is on point. Now, I don't believe this fight is difficult for being unrelenting like a Flame Lurker, but rather he is the best example in the series of an endurance fight. To be honest, in both the King of Storms and Nameless King phase, the attacks are heavily telegraphed. If you're not being overly greedy,
like me,
then he is a challenge that is quite possible to overcome. But with his large health pool and beginning phase being unpredictable, if you can't keep your dodges on point, you'll find yourself losing the health race in this fight. The only real complaint I could have doesn't even have to do with the King himself, but the camera in Dark Souls 3 as a whole. In the King of Storms phase, it can be a real pain to see what's going on at times, but it's never been enough of a problem for me to knock any points off his score. And of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the lore relating to the Nameless King being the firstborn of Gwyn. At some point, it's believed the king betrayed Gwyn in his fight against the Everlasting Dragons and as a result was banished from history, hence the whole Nameless bit. This was a massive wave for the Dark Souls lore because Gwyn's firstborn was long thought to be Solaire. Whatever you believe, there's no doubt in my mind that the Nameless King is the pinnacle of Dark Souls 3. If I had to give a nod to any boss in the series that's the most fun, it would go to Lady Maria. This battle can only be described as exhilarating. First, let me tell you a bit about Maria herself. She descended from Queen Annalise, the head of the Vilebloods. Cainhurst is well known for using blood arts to exert their power, but Maria held a certain honor in using her Rakuyo, a weapon that required dexterity and skill to wield rather than sheer inherited power. Maria trained under GEHRMAN as one of the very first hunters. It can be inferred that she was also assisting in the experimentation that went on in the research hall. The patients there all seem to hold Maria in high regard, so it's likely that she cared for them at the very least in the nightmare. Eventually, the Byrgenwerth scholars became aware of Mother Koss, a great one located in the fishing village. It's uncertain whether the scholars killed Mother Koss or if she was already dead, but what we do know is that this siege on the village enraged the orphan into cursing all future hunters to be resided to this nightmare if they became too bloodthirsty. The description of Maria's Rakuyo states that she eventually threw the weapon away down a well in the fishing village in disgust. I believe that the atrocities committed in the fishing village led to this, and even her possible suicide. This adds a whole nother layer to GEHRMAN's motivations for communing with the moon presence. Perhaps he was willing to host a dream where Maria could come back to life, so to speak, even if that meant his own slavery. But back to Maria, we know 4 things for absolute certain. She dislikes using blood arts in combat, she is a sympathetic character, she wants to hide the secret of the fishing hamlet, and despite her former pride in her skill in battle, she now resents it as a reminder of the hunter's mistakes. The reason I spent so much time painting this picture is how much it adds to the fight. Think about it, Maria has no interest in harming anybody, but she's willing to take up arms to stop you from discovering the hunter's shameful secret. Throughout the fight, she breaks down further and further to the point of resorting to blood arts and flames, anything she can possibly do to stop you. This desperation is very tragic, admirable, and almost beautiful in a way. That perfectly encapsulates my feelings on this fight as well. It's like GEHRMAN's fight on crack. Maria moves in the blink of an eye and chains attacks together so swiftly you can be quickly obliterated without careful attention to her movements. I actually have trouble putting the words together to describe exactly how it feels, but the best way I can say it is it feels like a tango between 2 elegant hunters, and it's such a blast that I never want it to end. But our wild curiosity must be satisfied, so we must liberate Maria of her post in the pursuit of ending this hunter's nightmare once and for all. In heavy contrast to a character like Maria who did a lot of wrong but tried to atone for her mistakes, Knight Artorias is a true hero that was so brave in the face of evil that he eventually succumbed to it. Artorias is another of the 4 Knights of Gwyn. He was known as the Abyss Walker because he made a covenant with the Abyss in order to traverse it and battle its dark wraiths. When word came of Uasil falling victim to the influence of Manus, Artorias stepped in to save the town. But even with all his power, he was sadly bested by Manus and was corrupted by the Abyss. When we meet Artorias, we see him in this moment of corruption, and as we duel with him, he summons more and more of the Abyss's strength to defeat you, falling further and further down its rabbit hole. It's genuinely sad watching the hero that we heard about all game fall from grace in front of our own eyes, but it gives so much motivation to you to grant him the honorable death he deserves. And damn if it isn't one of the best fights I've ever had the pleasure of playing. This is absolutely the Dark Souls version of the Lady Maria fight. It's a perfect clash between two skilled warriors at the height of their strength. The pacing of this fight is as fast as Dark Souls has to offer. Artorias is incredibly unforgiving and requires intense focus to be able to get a hit in unscathed, and is all around just so damn exciting to battle. Artorias remains one of the harder fights in the entire series for me personally, but I can never find myself getting frustrated with it because it's so fair in its challenge. No matter the difficulty, it's a bittersweet pleasure to press on and release the knight from his personal hell. Surprise! Nobody expects Ludwig! Seriously though, I read through so many comments guessing the top 10 and hardly anybody guessed Ludwig would get top honors. We'll gather around everyone and I'll tell you why I find this fight deserving of the title of Best Boss in Blood Souls. For starters, Ludwig is incredibly similar to Artorias in terms of lore. He was the leader of the church hunters that took over after GEHRMAN's group was disbanded, most known for wielding his enigmatic Holy Moonlight sword. Ludwig had an odd relationship with the weapon. He believed in accordance with his guidance rune that the sword would lead him to glory, and Ludwig was incredibly famous amongst the people of Yharnam for leading the conquest to eradicate the beasts. As with many hunters, however, Ludwig eventually fell prey to the bloodlust and was relegated to the hunter's nightmare. When you find Ludwig there, he's become that which he so proudly hunted, a beast. And the battle with this beast is downright flawless. It's perfectly paced, designed incredibly well with a wide and challenging moveset, and is a freaking blast to play. Once he hits half health though, things begin to change. As the beast stares into the green light, he begins to regain his composure and ultimately his humanity. Mentally at least.
You were at my side all along.
When has this ever happened though? It's ridiculous. Not only did FromSoft pack in the best large beast fight they've ever made, but they give you a second half against a towering swordsman. On top of that, they brought the freaking Moonlight Blade back for the DLC. I'm pretty sure everyone who's seen the cutscene loves it, especially with the amazing score that accompanies the whole change. And let me tell you, if you thought the battle against the beast was tough and fun, this half is on another level altogether. You have no relief anywhere. The entire battle is a danger zone with Ludwig firing magic attacks, reaching across the whole fucking arena to stab you and blasting out devastating AoEs. Your dodges have to be without error to come out on top. I'll be honest with you guys, the top 5 was hard to differentiate for me, except for the number 1 spot. Ludwig just has it all. He's got the lore, the perfectly balanced difficulty, not just 1 but 2 flawlessly designed battles, and the entertainment value is limitless. There's a lot of amazing bosses in these games, but I can say without hesitation that Ludwig is my personal favorite. Well everyone, I hope you've enjoyed ranking all 139 bosses with me. I've had so much fun being able to share my thoughts and experiences with you all. There's a lot I enjoy about these games, but what I always love most are its bosses. You all gave me the opportunity to have a platform to share that love, and I can't thank you enough for it. But maybe there's something I can do. If you didn't get a chance to check out my new scheduled video, I'm giving away a Dark Souls 3 Season Pass as a thanks from me to you for supporting this series. I know it's not much, but I wanted some way of showing my appreciation. All you have to do is follow me on Twitter and retweet out my tweet of this video. That's it, you have until noon Eastern time on Friday, July 8th to be eligible, and then I'll announce a winner selected from a randomizer in a video coming out on Friday. Wait a minute, a Friday video? But democracy, you said only Wednesdays and Saturdays from now on. What the f? Well, I've got one more surprise I've been holding out on. But geez, keep your pants on, it's gonna be a quick one, so don't get so excited. In all seriousness, much love to each and every one of you for supporting me. If you happen to be new here, I encourage you to subscribe for the upcoming series, and you should also check me out on Twitch where we play the Blood Souls games and more live. And as always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.